Hello, everyone. Welcome to the British History Channel and to a bit of a bonus interview to the schedule. If you've been here before, thank you for coming back. If this is your first time, then welcome. If you love British history, you're in the right place. Not only have I got a wonderful interview for you today, but I have a library of historian interviews which you can go back and enjoy. There's also some virtual tours, some mini history documentaries, and you can also join me each fortnight for British History Live, where we go really quite in depth into subjects around British history. So they're also really worth a check out as well. Today, I am joined by the Reverend Vanessa Barron, who is Canon Treasurer at Chichester Cathedral. And I was down there a few weeks ago for the opening of a brand new exhibition called Chichester 950. And the exhibition was so interesting and so well put together that I asked Vanessa if she would mind coming on and letting me interview her about it and having a chat about the exhibition. Her role is, or part of her role, is being responsible for the care and interpretation of the cathedral's fabric and treasures, hence why she was behind the choice of artifacts which went into the exhibition. Fascinating lady in her own right. She read philosophy at London City University, has an MA in medieval history. She trained as a deaconess at Ridley Hall and read theology at Cambridge and was among the very first cohort of women to be ordained priests in the Diocese of London in 1994. And I'm very happy to say that Vanessa has joined me today. Vanessa, welcome. Thank you so much for coming onto the British History Channel. And
Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited about talking to you because when I was down at Chichester and looking at your wonderful exhibition that you've put together and curated, I didn't have that much time with you. Obviously, you were showing people
Mm.
around and everything. And so when I got the opportunity to speak to you about it in a bit more detail, then I did jump at the chance. And you're so I did a little video while I was there trying to explain sort of the whole Chichester 950 celebrations. But can could you please give us a bit of a background about you, please, and your position at the cathedral, and also about the exhibition and how that's come about, please?
Fine, and do stop me if you need to ask me any other questions. I've been at the cathedral for the last 3.5 years. My official title is the Canon Treasurer, which makes me sound as if I'm all to do with money, which isn't true at all. The Treasurer is one of the traditional titles of one of the senior clergy at a cathedral, and actually they have responsibility for the cathedral's treasures and the fabric of the cathedral. So my primary responsibility is for the fabric of the cathedral and the things within it. I've got other responsibilities as well, because like any other member of the clergy, I take services, funerals. I have other specific areas of responsibility, particularly safeguarding.
Mm.
Um, I was, I've been in ministry a long time. I actually started out life as a nurse and a terminal
Ah.
care specialist. And it was working in a hospice that made me think about sidestepping from people's sort of physical care to their spiritual care. I trained as a deaconess and then became one of the very first women ever to be ordained priest in the Church of England. So I've been around for a long time. In fact, slightly surprisingly, I've spent most of my time in ministry as a school chaplain. So I was a school chaplain for nearly 25 years at two schools in London. So I ended up teaching. I taught RS philosophy and sort of little bits of history and art history. So it's been quite a sort of varied background, unexpected in various ways.
You've had a wonderful, exciting and life, it sounds.
Well, I didn't plan any of it. It just sort of happened more than anything.
Best way, isn't it?
Yeah,
Just
yes, absolutely. Yeah.
go with the opportunities. So for anyone who doesn't know where Chichester is or anything about the cathedral, sort of where are we in the country? And also, can you give us a little bit of the background to the founding of the cathedral? Because I
Hmm.
found this quite interesting.
Willingly. Chichester's right down on the south coast. It's in one of the sunniest and warmest parts of the country, which is a
Look
nice
at
place
you.
to be. In the Second World War, this part of the world, part of the country was responsible for growing tomatoes and strawberries, which tells you something about the climate. So we're very close to the sea. We're only 1.5 miles from Chichester Harbour, which has actually created problems over the past 1,000 years for the cathedral, because the westerly winds are laden with salt. So we're right down on the south coast, and we're an hour away from Brighton, half an hour from Portsmouth. Very, very close to the Roman Palace of Fishbourne, and in fact to the Roman port. And Chichester was originally a Roman city, and it's on Stane Street, one of the roads from the great Roman port at Fishbourne up to London. The cathedral, as you might guess from the fact we're celebrating our 950th anniversary, actually moved to Chichester in 1075. The original cathedral in Sussex, or the cathedral for the South Saxons, was in fact a little bit further south at Selsey. Christianity came first to Sussex, probably with Irish missionaries and possibly with traders. We really don't know that very, very early history. But we do know that a bishop from the north of England named Wilfrid landed, originally blown up, in fact, on a storm on the Sussex coast. And his life's quite interesting and controversial, but he came back in 681 and was given a grant of land on Selsey, and he founded a little monastery there. And that's the origins, really, of the church as we know it now in Sussex. So it dates back to Anglo-Saxon times, but it was way down on the coast at Selsey, which means Seal Island. And when the Normans conquered England, William the Conqueror wanted cathedrals in cities, not in the midst of the countryside. So the Council of London decreed that cathedrals would be moved, which is the reason why the cathedral was moved from this tiny little place down on Selsey to the old Roman city of Chichester, which is actually only about 5-6 miles away. But that's how it's ended up in Chichester.
Is there anything remaining in Selsey of the original cathedral?
Sadly, virtually nothing. It's all gone under the sea. There's a little place called Church Norton, which has a very small chapel, and it's just possible that the chancel there is a little bit of one of Wilfrid's remaining monastic buildings. We really don't know, but the truth is most of it's probably under the sea.
Right. Oh,
it is a pity.
That's a shame.
We have,
It is a
but
pity.
as part of the research for the 950 exhibition, we discovered, to our amazement, that we've got a painting of something that probably belonged to St Wilfrid. It's in the south transept, and it's a Tudor painting by a chap called Lambert Barnard, who painted for Bishop Sherborne, who was a bishop very early in the reign of Henry VIII, Bishop of Chichester. And there's this immense painting, and one side of it depicts the arrival of Wilfrid in Sussex. And there's a processional cross in the background, and the British Museum have just identified that as being a very accurate representation of a 7th century cross. And they think it's probably one that Wilfrid had. So we haven't got anything specific that belongs to him, but we now believe we've got a painting of something that belonged to him.
Right.
Which is actually extraordinary, because you suddenly realize you're going back, well, 1,000 years, more than 1,000 years.
So is the thought that perhaps when the painting was created that the cross still existed?
Yes, that's what the British Museum have decided. They are absolutely certain that the cross, when it was painted, it's so accurate a depiction of a processional cross that they think it would have been in the treasury at the cathedral and then destroyed, sadly, at the Reformation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
But it's one of the
tantalizing.
things that came out of this sort of research for the exhibition that we didn't expect.
So what was obviously I know it's the 950-year anniversary, but what was the inspiration behind putting together the exhibition? Sort of what are you trying to show with it or demonstrate with it?
What we really wanted to do was just tell the story of the Christian faith in the Diocese of Chichester as much as we could. And because written records very obviously just don't exist for most of this time, We had to do it through objects, through artefacts. So the idea was to try and gather together various artefacts, and then more recently some written documents that sort of show how people express their Christian faith at different times down the centuries. Very conscious that the Christian faith, while much of it has remained the same, very obviously the way in which people experienced it, what they did to express that faith has changed.
Mm.
And so that's why we've concentrated on trying to tell people stories and try and make some of these objects, which otherwise just sort of sit in an exhibition case and look rather boring, try and make them come to life to sort of say, well, what did they mean to people? Why were they important to people? That's what we've been trying to get across.
So what's the time span of the artifacts? What kind of time span have you managed to cover?
The very, very earliest objects have come from bishops' tombs. We're not quite certain of their dates, but they're probably late 12th century. Yes, late 12th century. Excavation work was carried out in the cathedral back in the 1830s, and they uncovered some medieval bishops' tombs, and with typical 19th century curiosity, opened them.
Oh yes, had a poke about.
Yes, so they're too good an opportunity to miss. They must have expected to find things because they had on hand one of Chichester's best engravers, a man named Thomas King. And when these tombs were opened, at least two of them contained completely intact skeletons, complete with various other grave goods. And Thomas King made absolutely exquisite engravings of what was seen and what was discovered. Virtually all of the things that were found in the tombs were, with the exception of the skeletons themselves, were taken out and are on display in the cathedral treasury. So, and some of those are in the exhibition. So we at least know exactly where they were found on a skeleton or found in the tomb. And so those are the earliest things we've got, and they're probably date to the reign of Bishop Luther, who was Bishop of Chichester from 1191 to 1123, or Cephric II, who was Bishop of Chichester from 1180.
Wow.
Yeah, so they're pretty old. Yes.
They're pretty old. And then we go right through till when in the exhibition?
Right through to the 20th century. Some of the last artifacts we've put in the exhibition is the Bishop's Cross, the petrol cross that belonged to Bishop George Bell, who was Bishop of Chichester in the Second World War. And he was particularly famous for having opposed the blanket bombing of Dresden and Hamburg. He wasn't a pacifist necessarily, but he was opposed to that particular method of warfare, which he thought was felt was disproportionate. So the last display panel is photographs showing various ways in which the Church of England and society has diversified over the last 50 years in particular.
It really is a fascinating timeline because it is set out like a timeline as well.
It is set out like a timeline, yes, century by century. Yeah.
It was great. And I think for me, the sort of the crosses right through from the processional cross of Wilfrid, which obviously you have the painting in, is it the West Transept, you say?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
But then obviously a photo of it in the exhibition. And then that one stands out to me, and then almost like juxtaposed to the is it World War I or World War II cross, which was made of pallet boards?
Oh yes, that's World War One. Yes,
World War One, and I found that so poignant.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Because it's such a stark, simple wooden cross. It was made out of duck boards from the trenches in World War One. That's come to us from a parish church just north of Brighton, where it normally hangs, and it just simply marked the grave of an unknown soldier in World War One, and they've been happy to lend it to us. And then a little bit further along, we've got a field crucifix that was used by a chaplain in World War II and handed to a soldier on the beaches at Dunkirk. So yes, that so tracing the cross through that exhibition, you're right, is something that actually comes right through
Mm,
um, the whole sort of 950 years. Hardly, in a sense, you'd expect that because the cross is so very core to the Christian faith. But and actually, one of my favourite items is one of the tiny little crosses we've got there, which is the Coombs crucifix dug up in a field outside the parish church at Coombs near Lancing. And that has almost definitely come again from a processional cross, but it's only a tiny little thing. It's only about 6 inches high. And it was probably wrenched off the processional cross at the Reformation. It's broken, the left arm's missing. And the archaeologists say it's not plough damage, it's actually been sort of torn apart. And it's so poignant because I think because it's a little 13th century crucifix, and Jesus's head he's just died, and his head is lolling to one side. And the artist has managed to sort of capture both the suffering of Christ, but he's also crowned. And there's a sort of stillness, and I think a really dignified sort of side to that. And then it's got this extraordinary history of having been torn
mm,
away from its original processional staff and just simply chucked outside into a field.
mm. This is where objects tell human stories, I
Yeah,
suppose,
I think
isn't it?
it's
It's the way we've
extraordinary things.
interacted,
Yeah, absolutely.
used them.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
amazing. So not all of the artifacts were from the cathedral treasury particularly. So have you had many donations, or are most of the things from the cathedral itself?
It's about 60% of the items are from the cathedral itself, but others have come from parish churches. I wrote round to all the parishes in the diocese, to every single parish, and said, "What have you got?
Mhm.
What have you got that really matters to you? What
Mm,
tells your story?" Now, a number of parishes replied. Interestingly, often what told their story most effectively, or what mattered to them the most, couldn't be moved. It was, for instance, some graffiti on a wall or a painting of something or other. But others did come back saying, "No, we've got this that we think is really, really important." Um, and we've been able to incorporate quite a lot of them into the exhibition.
that's
And
lovely.
that was a wonderful journey of discovery because by and large, no one knew about these various things. Um, an example of that, for instance, is again going back to World War One. I don't know if you noticed it, but there's just a stick in the World War One section.
Mm,
It's a sort of knob kerry stick, and that's come from the parish of New Timber, again just north of Brighton, and that commemorates the sinking of the SS Mendi in 1917, where 607 men from the Eastern Cape in South Africa died. They were en route from South Africa to France to help at World War One. They weren't soldiers; they were part of the Labour Corps, but their ship was rammed by another ship in dense fog, and the Mendi went down, and
mm,
607 men died. And there were lots of eyewitness accounts because other ships and other boats came to the help of those who'd gone in the water. And there were lots of eyewitness accounts of how these men stood on the deck and danced their war dances as the chaplain prayed for them as the ship went down. And
wow.
this stick came from the Eastern Cape in just over 10 years ago, really, to commemorate them. And it's come from New Timber Church, where the memorial is.
Mm,
So I found that incredibly poignant, actually, the idea of more than 600 men who never even set foot in Europe
mm,
died before they actually reached here. I thought that was a very poignant story.
very. And it's such a good opportunity to bring that story
Hmm.
to eyes and ears who wouldn't have ever known
Well,
about
I'd
it.
never heard of the SS Mendi, and when I began to read about it, I felt quite ashamed because, in fact, in South Africa, um, the SS Mendi is remembered, and the day she went down is, in fact, South Africa Day. And I thought, how on earth have I never heard the story? It
No?
was,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's a local one. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, it's out there now. Good. That's good. Another story that you have included in the exhibition, which intrigued me, was the one about the Nuns of the Society of St Margaret. Can you tell us a
Mm.
bit about them, please?
Yeah, I was completely fascinated when I began to read about them. I knew a little bit about them. They were one of the very first orders of nuns to be re-established in England after the Reformation. At the Reformation, um, the new Church of England got rid of the orders of monks and nuns that were associated with the Roman Catholic Church. But with the revival of Anglo-Catholicism in the 19th century, some of the orders came back. And this small group of nuns who were based at East Grinstead, they were highly controversial at the time, partly because being single women, there was quite a lot of concern that they were coming too much under the control of the priest who was their confessor. But what fascinated me most about them is their background, because almost without exception, they came from well-to-do families. So these were women who'd grown up with servants. They weren't used to manual work. They'd chosen of their own free will to become nuns, and so doing were really defying social convention when it was expected of a young woman that if she didn't marry, she would stay at home and look after her parents. And these women have chosen to do something different. So I was interested in that. I was also very interested in what they did because many of them nursed. They went to study either at St George's Hospital or the Westminster Hospital in London, and had some rudimentary training in nursing. And then one of their primary areas of mission was to go and nurse local families. And these nuns would actually go, I didn't realize it wasn't just that they weren't just visiting, they would actually go and live with the families. So when you read their diaries, and the archive is kept in Oxford, you can read these nuns' diaries. And you get these really poignant accounts of women who were used at home to having servants, but now find themselves living with a farming family, collecting firewood to boil the copper in order to be able to wash sheets, feeding the children, and nursing people who were dying from typhoid or scarlet fever or tuberculosis, all of which were highly infectious diseases.
Mm.
So putting their own lives at risk, as well as actually undergoing really hard physical work. And the order kept a record of the names of the nuns and the families they'd gone to stay with, and what the name of the person they were nursing and the outcome. And that's where you can sort of see that they were nursing typhoid, cholera, scarlet fever. I thought this is an extraordinary story.
Yeah.
Really before the advent even of cottage hospitals. And they were remarkable, and they were remarkably successful. Many of the people they nursed actually survived. I think in part because what they introduced was very good basic hygiene.
Mm.
Yeah, but they were courageous women and defying the social norms of the day. So I found that fascinating. We tend to think of nuns as being old-fashioned and conformist, and these
Mm.
women were absolutely nothing of the sort.
No, right from the get-go. The
Right
fact
from
that
the
they
get-go,
existed
yes.
was yeah, controversial.
And the
Wow.
other thing they're associated with, they did a lot of embroidery, exquisite ecclesiastical embroidery. And there's just a small example in the exhibition. And again, we tend to think of embroidery as being a very traditional woman's activity. But as well as doing it to the glory of God, what they would do as well, the Society of St Margaret and some others orders of nuns, is they taught embroidery to local impoverished women in order to give them a form of income.
Mm.
So you can take a piece of embroidery and just think, oh, this is just religious art and this is traditional women's work. But actually, it was very much more.
Wow.
So
I love that. I love their story. I'm so glad you managed to get that one in the exhibition as
well,
well.
I was determined to get as many women in as possible. And given that women get written out of history, it's actually quite difficult to do at times.
So there's another woman that I'm now remembering in the exhibition. But please remind me of her name. Was it Anna Tree?
Anne Tree, yes, Mother
Anne
Tree.
Tree.
Yeah.
Tell us about her, please.
Yes, there's a photograph of the memorial to her because we know very little about her. She was one of the Sussex martyrs. She died, she said, desperately trying to think of the date to make sure it's accurate. I'm pretty certain it's 1556. She was burnt to death in East Grinstead. And I mean, it's such an awful way to die, isn't it? The idea of being burnt alive. She was one of a number of people in Sussex who were reading their Bibles in English at a time when that was forbidden. And as a result of reading her Bible in English, she came to deny certain Roman Catholic beliefs about the nature of the Mass. And she, together with some of her male friends, was tried by the Bishop of Chichester, and she was sentenced to death. But I was intrigued there. I did know a little bit about these people. I knew about these groups of people who met to read the Bible together, which tells us something about literacy rates in 16th century England, and that the fact that these groups included women, and women who were so convinced of what they believed that they were willing to die for it, and to stand up and in their trials actually defend their beliefs, completely fascinated me. And the photograph of the memorial to her, in fact, is placed very close to an open book, which is a Fox's Book of Martyrs. And we've got the book open at the record of some of the Sussex martyrs and their trials. So again, we know very little about her, but she struck me as being a woman of such extraordinary courage, and again, willing to defy a lot of the conventions of her day.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I love all of this. So it must be very difficult, but do you have a favourite object in the exhibition?
That actually is very difficult. I knew you were going to ask me this question. I feel like Desert Island Disc and sort of say, am I allowed more than one? But one of the things I love the most actually is a photograph of one of the statues of St. Richard, Bishop of Chichester, who was canonized and became St. Richard of Chichester. Many people will know the prayer that sort of entered, that we pray regularly. We've got a photograph of his statutes, and that might sound really boring. There's some of the regulations he produced when he was bishop, full clergy. But when you read them really closely, they're really quite funny. And one of the things I like the most is one of the statutes is, no priest should say mass in soiled or tatty vestments, or no priest should say mass in soiled or tatty garments. And you fell to thinking, what on earth were they doing?
Yes, that he felt he had to make that clear.
Presumably he'd been going around the diocese and was absolutely appalled by the fact that priests weren't washing their robes and they were all torn and needed mending. So it's those tiny little things that you see what looks like a boring document, and you look at it carefully and you suddenly go, this isn't boring at all. This is really telling us about the period. My other favourite one actually is that little cross from Coombs that I mentioned. It's so small and so insignificant, but it's French, it comes from Limoges. So I wonder what the story is there, who bought it, or whether that they were exporting these enamelled little crosses and things from Limoges, from France to England. But again, where's that journeyed from and how did it end up in Coombs? Coombs parish church is very close to the River Arun. So while Coombs today feels like an isolated parish church, back in the 13th century, it was on a major sort of transport route. So it was nowhere near as remote as it appears now. But again, you just sort of wonder, where's that been? Who's looked at that? Who's held it? Who's looked at that depiction of Christ on the cross and thought about his suffering to help them endure their own suffering, or praying for somebody else? It's making that type of connection I find so interesting.
Definitely that yeah, it's not just these big objects, it's literally who's touched them and what they've thought when they've been with them.
Or one of the bishop's rings. I managed to I did a little bit of research on what did these rings mean in the early Middle Ages, because the medieval mind was thought so much in symbols and the idea of the ring representing eternity. But part of the service, when a bishop was ordained, when the ring was put on his finger, the words were that may you preserve without harm your bride, the Holy Church of God. So these rings, which the bishop wears on his right hand, a bishop wears on, or she nowadays wears on her right hand, but on the ring finger, symbolizing that marriage. And I loved those words, that you won't bring any harm to your bride, the Church of God. And again, I fell to thinking, how did these bishops feel about their diocese, their church?
Yeah, wonderful. So were there any objects that you'd have liked to bring out of the treasury, or maybe there'll be a different opportunity in the future, but is there anything that you'd like to highlight that the cathedral has that maybe we haven't got on display at the moment?
We managed to get out one of the biggest objects from the treasury, which was the Ashburnham chalice, which commemorates the Ashburnham family regaining their lands, which had been confiscated during the Commonwealth during the Civil War, and they regained them at the restoration of Charles II, and in gratitude gave this really large chalice to the parish church. It's held in the cathedral treasury now, and we use it every Christmas and Easter. So these things that sit in the treasury, lots of them are actually still taken out and used, because and parish churches take their stuff out. Yes, there's one very big object in the corner of the treasury that staff here would have loved us to have out, but we just didn't have room for it. And that's the cockerel that used to stand on top of the spire of the cathedral. The cathedral spire collapsed in 1861. It sort of concertinaed in on itself. Fortunately, no one was hurt. People had realised it was going to come down. But the cockerel survived. It's a bit battered. And and he sits on the corner.
It's been a long way down.
Yes, yes. It would have been good to get him out, and children in particular would have liked him. We would quite like to find a better display point for him, because he's a bit neglected.
Oh, maybe there'll be some chance some point in the future.
Well, in fact, I heard only yesterday someone told me of where some of the stones were from the very top of the spire, which I didn't know about. And I thought, right, I think we need them back here in the cathedral. So
yeah. Yeah. But safer this time. They can stay on the floor.
Yeah, hope so. Yes.
So thank you so much for your time today, Vanessa. Before we go, because the exhibition is running throughout most of this year, so before we go, let everyone know who's watching and listening how they can, or what they can expect from Chichester 950, because I know it's not just the exhibition, and where they can go for more information if they would like to visit.
The best place to go for information is the cathedral website. You just simply type in Chichester Cathedral and the website will come up. And actually on the homepage now, you'll land and it will say 950 celebrations on the homepage. So that's by far the best place to go. And that will give then further details of concerts we've got coming up, the celebrations in June around St. Richard's Day and the Feast of the Holy Trinity, because the cathedral is dedicated to the Holy Trinity. The autumn half term, October, we have an immense light show for a week. So details of that are on the website. The exhibition itself, we're not dismantling it till the end of November. So the cathedral is open. We always encourage people to check that there's nothing on. It's a working cathedral, and some people are disappointed when they suddenly turn up without having checked and realise they can't actually get in. But do come and see. We'd love to meet you.
Wonderful. Well, I hope many people manage to get to come and see it. It's absolutely wonderful and it's brilliantly put together. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining.
And thank you very much for talking to me.